USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. And I come from a military family. I come from a large family. My father was a World War II veteran, and most of my uncles served in the military during the 40s, during the war. My father was the super of an apartment building on Willoughby Avenue, and we were the first black family on the block. Me and my best friend, Mickey, we dropped out of high school in the fall of '67. We initially wanted to go in the Navy because my cousin Cedric was in the Navy. And he was writing letters home saying, yeah, man, we just sailed through the Straits of Gibraltar. And then now we're getting ready to go on a Mediterranean cruise. I said to Mickey one day, I said, man, we want to do that too, man. So Mickey and I went downtown Brooklyn to the Navy recruiting office. So the recruiter said, have you graduated high school yet? We said, no. He said, well, the Navy just changed its regulations. They said they won't accept you at 17 unless you've already finished high school. And then he said, but the Marine Corps recruiter right next door, they'll take you at 17. That's me and Mickey. And those were taken at Parris Island, December of '67. While we were in boot camp, one of our drill instructors says to us, he said, I'm sorry, girls. Because this was before we graduated. They called us girls all through boot camp. You don't get to call yourself a Marine until you graduate. He said, I'm sorry, girls, but most of your sweet asses are going to Vietnam, because what happened was the Tet Offensive had jumped off. This is our graduation platoon. Yeah, this is Reese. He was a mean one. He was the one who said, I'm sorry, girls. This is me. And that's Mickey. So we graduated January 15th, 1968, and then the next day, January 16th, we boarded buses, which took us up to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where we would begin infantry training. I got sick at Camp Lejeune from the drinking water. So Mickey and I got separated. I was given an MOS of 0331. I was an M60 machine gunner. When it was time to go to Vietnam, and we got on buses at Camp Pendleton, we got on buses full of Marines. We got on the bus, and the bus took us to El Toro Airport. We boarded a civilian American Airlines jet with stewardesses and everything, full of Marines. And they served us cocktails and everything all the way there. And we landed in Da Nang. It was like around noon. And when we got off the plane, the stewardesses gave each one of us a kiss and a hug, every single one of us, as we got off the plane. In August of '68, I was assigned to the 27th Marines, Bravo Company 127. So after I was with the 27th Marines for about 2.5 weeks, word came around that the 27th Marines were rotating. The 27th Marines were leaving Vietnam. But we knew guys who had arrived a couple of weeks ago. We were not involved with those plans of going back. So when the 27th Marines left Vietnam in September of '68, we were transferred up north to Northern I Corps, up north to Quang and Dong Ha. So I was transferred up north to the 4th Marines, to Bravo Company 14. And we got there in September '68. So once I got there, I knew I was going to be somewhere close to Mickey, because Mickey was with the 9th Marines. And I knew that they were up north. So when I got there, I asked around, I said, are the 9th Marines around here? And somebody said, yeah, man, they're right across the road. I said, oh, wow. So I was going to find Mickey, you know. And I said, hey, do you know where 3rd Platoon is? And they said, well, 3rd Platoon they're over at Camp Carroll. So I said, well, where's Camp Carroll? They said, this down Route 9, about 10 miles down Route 9. So I had my rifle on my shoulder. I went down to the road, and a Jeep came by. I said, where you going? I said, I'm going to Camp Carroll. I said, get on. So I got on the Jeep. It took me down to Camp Carroll. I got off. I said, is 3rd Platoon Charlie Company here? They said, yeah, 3rd Platoon is right down that ridge. So I'm walking down the ridge. And as I'm walking, I'm passing by guys who were at their foxholes. And I asked one guy, I said, you know where Goring is? I said, Goring? He said, yeah, Goring's right in that tent down. He said, hey, Goring, somebody see you. And Mickey was in a 2-man, because we slept in 2-man tents out when we were on patrol. We called them hooches. So Mickey was in this hooch, and Mickey had no idea I was even up north. So Mickey came out of the hooch, and he said, Buck! Because that's my nickname, Buck. And we ran into each other, we grabbed each other and hugged. So I ran into Mickey like 3 times when I was in Vietnam. I saw him about 3 times. He was wounded in the head at an ammo dump explosion in March, and he came home. And nobody talks a lot about R&R and what happened. R&R was a big part of the Vietnam experience. So what happened with me was, in March of 1969, we were on a squad-sized patrol at the base of Dong Ha Mountain. So the word comes down the line, R&R quotas are in. So they passed the word, R&R quotas are in. And then the word comes back from the back. Where? Tokyo. Tokyo. And then the word comes back from the rear. When? Tomorrow. So once we got back to the base, the next chopper that came in with mail or supplies, I got on that chopper, and it took me to LZ Stud, to our rear operating base. I put my tropical dress uniform on, and I went to the dispersing office, and I said, how much money do I have in the books? And he said, $1,200. I said, I'm going on R&R. He said, how much you want? I said, how much do I have? He said, $1,200. I said, I want it all. Anyway, when we landed in Tokyo, it was late. It was maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what time it was, but it was dark and it was late and it was snowing. So the plane lands in Tokyo at the military base, but the PX is open, the exchange. So the first thing we do, of course, we got to go into the PX and buy coats. So we all go into the PX. So I made friends on the plane with 2 Marines because we're sitting 3 across. They're from different units. I don't even remember their names right now. So we went to the PX, we bought our coats, and then we went outside and we got a cab. A taxi's right there waiting for you because they're there, you know. He said, come, I'll take you to a nice club. I'll take you to a nice club. Taxi driver takes us to a bar in Yokohama called the Blue Note. I never forget these things. The name of the bar was the Blue Note. So we go in the Blue Note, and there's this bartender back there, and there's girls in there sitting at the bar, and we go in and we start buying drinks, and the girls that we're buying drinks for, they're drinking, but they're not really drinking alcohol. See, they're just, because otherwise they get drunk. You know, they're just working girls, you know, but they're charging us as if it's alcohol. So we're in the bar, and everybody gets matched up with a girl. The girl that I get matched up with was the youngest of the girls in the bar. And I was 18, and she was probably 17, or maybe 16, I don't know. But I remember her name to this day. Her name was Kikuko Mantani. And her nickname was Yuka. We spent 10 days in Yokohama in a Japanese-style hotel, and we each had our girlfriends. And we spent every single dime that we had. Because when you went on R&R in Vietnam, you lived like there was no tomorrow. And the reason you lived like there's no tomorrow is because when you leave R&R, you're going back to the war. And you don't know whether you're ever going to go back home. You're going back to the war. So when I left Tokyo and went back to the war, a couple of months later, I got shot in the back by a sniper. On May 10th, 1969, we got up early because we knew that we were going on an all-day squad-sized patrol. Now, we're walking in a winding stream, and the water is about ankle deep, and it's just, and we're in the middle of it. And there are mountains on both sides of us, or hills, tall hills on both sides of the stream. So we're like in an alley. And the point man was the guy named Hallett. All of a sudden, we hear, and we hit the water. And the Lieutenant Ludlam had told me the morning before, he said, G-man, remember, if we need that machine gun, the sign is going to be buddy up, buddy up. He said, okay, I got it. So we heard that note, we heard, and we hit the water. And then a few seconds, the Lieutenant Ludlam said, buddy up, let's get that buddy up here. So me and Murphy, we head towards the front of the squad. And we can't see Hallett because he's around a bend. But so me and Murphy, we settled on the left bank of the stream. We're up on the bank, and ahead of us is a big flat rock. And this rock has a flat surface. And it's about as far as from here to that house across the street. And so I tell Murphy, I said, aim and let the bullets hit that rock and ricochet around the corner. So Murphy gets the machine gun and he's hitting the rock. So you can see the traces. And he's hitting the rock and the traces are going around the corner. And then Hallett comes around the corner, he rejoins us. We didn't know whether Hallett was dead or alive. But that we heard, Hallett took about 8 bullets in his legs. But miraculously, he was still walking because the bullets that hit Hallett, they all grazed him. His pants were all torn up from these bullets that hit his legs, but he could still walk, which was amazing. We started receiving sniper fire from this hill and sniper fire from this hill. We're caught in the middle. Lieutenant Ludlam said, all right, we're going to have to take the hill. We all turned to our left, and we began assaulting the hill going up. And we were receiving sniper fire and grenades, Chicon grenades. They're throwing grenades at us, but the vegetation is so thick that the grenades are not very effective, and some of them were actually defective because they were just old. The guys who were throwing the grenades were so close that you could hear the spoons flying off the grenades. And we're firing up. We're firing through the jungle, through the vegetation, because we want to make our way up to the top. And as we're doing this, I look to my right, and a guy named Darnell, I saw a bullet go across his left eye. Right? I heard the shot, and I saw the flesh removed from his left eye like this, and he went down. I said, damn it, they got Darnell. And then a few seconds later, I looked over there where Darnell went down. He was standing back up. I said, get down, get down. He got back down. The bullet that hit Darnell, just like the bullet that hit Hallett, it grazed the top of his eye. So he was the second one to get wounded. Then, to my left, as we're going up this hill, and they're throwing these grenades, Holland, who was to my left, he gets shrapnel in his shoulder. So Holland is wounded now. So now we have 3 wounded, and we're still trying to get to the top of this hill so that we can get medevac choppers to get these guys out. So on our way up to the top of the hill, we come across a big log, a fallen tree log. When I got on top of the log, as soon as I got on top of the, and I don't know why I did it the way that I did, but as soon as I got on top of the log, I got hit from the back by a sniper, and I went down. And the bullet hit me in the back, a half-inch from my spine, and it went straight through my it went straight through. And I went down, and when people asked me how it felt, I tell them it felt like somebody hit me with a baseball bat. And I went down, and all the blood was pouring down my chest. And there was so much blood coming down my chest that I could smell it. When I got hit, I let out a shout. I said, "Ah!" And I was crying. I was crying because I never felt that kind of pain. And when I first got hit, for the first maybe 10 seconds, I thought I was going to die. But then after 10 seconds, I realized I wasn't going to die, because if I was going to die, I would have been dead already. And it was hurting too bad for me. It was hurting too bad. I was alive. I was awake. After I got wounded, we still had to climb about an hour to get to an area where we could call in a medevac chopper to get the 4 of us out. And the choppers, we could hear them coming, and the medevac chopper came. It was a CH-46 Sea Knight, a Marine Corps chopper with the big double blades, and it didn't land. It hovered. And I mean, it hovered about 50 feet in the air, or more maybe. It was high. And it let down a cable, a metal cable with a stretcher on the end of it. They laid me down in the stretcher, strapped me in, and then they stood the stretcher up like this, straight up. And then they began to hoist me up. And as I was going up, because you're standing up in this, it's a vertical stretcher. And as I was going up, as soon as all my men were down there at the bottom, and they were all doing like this. And they said, "G-Man, we'll see you back in the world." So when I got to Guam, I called home, and I told my mom and everybody that I got shot, and I started crying. I said, "No, I'm okay, Mom. I'm all right." I said, "I'll be home in a couple of weeks." So anyway, so when we landed at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn, we got on buses, which took us to St. Albans Naval Hospital in Queens. So when I got to St. Albans, Mickey was there. So the next day was Sunday, and I had to beg Mickey to put his uniform on. And we got on the subway, we got on the J train, we went to Brooklyn, we got off at Halsey Street, and we walked down Broadway, and we turned right on Putnam Avenue, and I was back on my block. When I got to the house, I walked in the gate, I opened the living room door, and my 3 sisters, they screamed, "Ah!" And my father, he was laying on the couch taking a nap. He was on the couch sleeping. And when they screamed, he woke up and saw me, and he started crying, My mother ran out of the kitchen. It was just a joy to have been able to survive the war and be home again, When I got home, nobody in my family, none of my brothers and sisters, nobody, none of my friends ever asked me what happened. Nobody ever asked me anything. Not even what was it like. I found out about Gallery magazine when I was working for the Veterans Educational Center at LaGuardia College. And in 1991, we had a Vietnam veterans reunion. And one of the guys that I served with in Vietnam, named Marty, who's my first squad leader at Bravo 14, he came to the reunion. It was the first time I was seeing him since Vietnam, and that was 1991. And he told me, he said, "Eddie," he said, Gallery magazine, he said, they have a thing called Heroes, the military experience, and they pay $500 for stories. Yeah, this is a story I wrote about Mickey, see? It's called Mickey from Panama. I was always a good writer. So I had 5 of them published. My dad, he served in France and Berlin, and he also served in Burma. That's my mom, yeah. My book is Deep Down in Brooklyn. The reason I chose that title is because it's a deep story. And also because we had a cellar apartment of an apartment building, and that's pretty deep. That's deep down. And it's not just my story, but it's a story written from an historical perspective, because it includes institutions and places and things and people and dates and times and significant events that occurred and how people reacted to them. And I wanted to write it because I wanted to write it all down because of its uniqueness and because of the unique characters in there, and also because I wanted to write it before I forget everything. They talk about World War II, which my father and a lot of my uncles were in. And that generation is referred to these days as the greatest generation. And I agree. But lately I said, well, you know what? Each generation that served is the greatest generation. The men and women who serve now, they're a great generation because they're all volunteers. World War II was a draft. Vietnam was a draft. But these young people now, they're all volunteers. So they're a great generation too, you know. And here we served, and almost 59,000 Vietnam veterans, almost 59,000 were killed in a war in a country that didn't do anything to us. And that's why the college kids back in those days were going crazy. Of course, because it didn't make sense. And that's why the anti-war protesters, that's why, because it didn't make sense for 58,000+ Americans to die. I'm sorry, but it just, I am a patriotic American. I love my country. I have the American flag flying right now on my porch. And I love this country. But if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.